Night pressed against the window like a held breath, and I mapped legends with a pen that shook. Alex Mercer said, "Truth hides in footprints we refuse to see." The board glowed with pins, yarn, and faces that never agreed. Coffee bit my tongue and kept me brave. The word Bigfoot sat beside river mud and casts that mocked me. Mokele Mbembe swam in a pixel lake, and my pulse followed its way. I told myself this was method, not mania. Alex Mercer said, "Evidence isn't loud, it whispers." The whisper sounded like rain on neon, like tape hiss from an old recorder. I rewound interviews until their doubts blurred. The room felt smaller than my intent. A photo of Noah caught the lamp and stabbed me with memory. I promised him answers. Alex Mercer said, "One more lead, then sleep." I kept the promise half true and sharpened the next question. The archive smelled like wet paper and old lightning, and the clerk barely glanced up. Alex Mercer said, "I filed the request last month." A gray box arrived with the weight of rumor. The label read Field Notes, unsorted. My pulse set the metronome as I lifted the lid. The first journal had edges like bitten bark. I traced a name I did not know, and felt a tremor. Alex Mercer said, "Write like you want to be believed." The dead writer had tried, and the pages sweated fear. He drew a lake that bent like a spine. He wrote of eyes that watched from reeds. I believed him because his hand shook in the margins. A clipping fell out and cut the silence. A ranger vanished the same week. Noah called me from the trail. The dates married like conspirators. Alex Mercer said, "Coincidence is lazy." I turned the page and refused to be lazy. The office walls wore diplomas like shields, and the books leaned like a jury. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Legends keep towns alive, not truths." Her voice was kind, but she stacked it like bricks. I set the journal on her desk and waited. She flipped to the lake sketch and frowned with care. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Patterns demand rigor." I told her the dates, and the ranger, and the call I still replay. She closed the book and met my eyes like a final exam. Alex Mercer said, "I need a skeptical map." She sighed, then circled 3 coordinates on a blank grid. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "If you must hunt, start where stories overlap." Clock talked like boot steps on wet wood. I thanked her, and hated needing thanks. The door felt heavier from the inside. Doubt followed me out and walked at my pace. The hallway outside the office hummed like a throat clearing, and I drifted to a bench where memory sat waiting. Noah's last message lived in my pocket like a hot coal. Alex Mercer said, "I should have gone with you." The bench did not forgive, and neither did the clock. I pressed play, and the forest returned like breath. He laughed at a bird that mocked his steps. He said the river sounded older than maps. Static chewed the edges of his words. The laugh thinned and turned into wind. Alex Mercer said, "You were close, then gone." I watched raindrops slide on the glass and choose their paths. Each drop found an end I could not. A janitor passed, and his cart sang wheels on tile. I ended the message and kept the silence. The bench held my weight and my regret, like it had trained for both. Back home the lock stuck as if it held counsel with the dark. The room remembered me with a hush. An envelope waited on the floor like a trap set for hope. Alex Mercer said, "No return address, no trust." I opened it anyway. The paper smelled like damp cellar. A single sheet, typed, offered a meeting where 3 waterways join. It named the society with the warmth of a threat. It knew Noah's date and the ranger's route. Alex Mercer said, "They have watched longer than I have searched." The letter warned that truth unburied can drown a city. It promised proof and a price. The map fragment marked a trail I had already feared. I stood very still so my hands would not show me. Alex Mercer said, "We go knowing the cost, or we never go." I folded the page and chose motion over sleep. The forest swallowed the road like an oath, and my headlights fought shadows older than maps. Alex Mercer said, "Wilderness carries truth in its silence." Gravel crunched beneath tires, and the rain whispered against glass. The trailhead appeared as a scar in the trees, a wooden sign leaning like it knew secrets. I killed the engine, and the night took over with insects and the smell of pine. My boots sank in mud that remembered storms. I tightened my pack straps and breath rose like pale smoke. Alex Mercer said, "Every step deeper, every step closer." The world felt like a stage for something unseen, as though eyes pressed against my back. Lightning flashed, briefly etching the mountains into memory. The forest answered with thunder that rolled like drums from a hidden tribe. I pushed forward because stillness was heavier than fear. Evelyn Hart caught up at dawn, boots wet from grass, eyes lit with reluctant duty. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Logic tells me to leave, but here I am." She carried a notebook and a frown carved by doubt. I offered her trail mix, and silence filled the rest. The map spread across a stump, dotted with circles like warnings. Alex Mercer said, "Every overlap is a door waiting to open." She circled one with her pen and sighed. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "History says monsters serve fear, not truth." Birds startled from a tree, and both our heads lifted. The forest seemed to listen as we whispered over myths. She folded the map with the neatness of a contract she hated signing. Alex Mercer said, "We walk where others stop." She muttered something softer, a prayer or a curse. The forest thickened until paths became guesses, and air pressed like a secret on our skin. Alex Mercer said something broke this way. A sapling bent, splintered as if by weight no man could carry. Evelyn touched the tear with her fingertips, eyes narrowed. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Storms do this too, remember storms." I crouched, tracing the gouge with my palm, mud damp and fresh. The silence cut deeper than any storm. Birds had fled, leaving air without song. Alex Mercer said, "Absence is louder than sound." My chest thudded, each beat a warning. A branch snapped behind us, sharp as gunfire. We froze, breath locked. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, "Tell me that was wind." I could not. We stood, caught between running and chasing, and the forest chose neither. The man appeared as if carved from the mist, clothes too clean for wilderness. He smiled without warmth. The keeper of secrets said, "You walk roads better left untraveled." His voice was calm, yet heavy as locked doors. Evelyn stepped back, eyes sharp behind glass. I said, "Truth isn't your property." He adjusted his coat, gestures rehearsed like a lecture. The keeper of secrets said, "Truth isn't yours to reveal either." Thunder echoed his words, trees bowing with the wind. My fists clenched against reason. Evelyn whispered, "Alex, don't." But the air itself dared me to move. He watched me the way hunters watch snares. I blinked, and he was gone, absorbed by rain, leaving threat as souvenir. We stumbled into a cave mouth carved into rock like an old scar, hidden by vines. Evelyn said, "This was never on the map." Her voice trembled with awe and fear. I touched the carvings etched on the stone, spirals wrapping beasts with too many eyes. Alex Mercer said, "Someone marked what they feared." Our lantern painted walls with shadows that moved like they remembered. Bones lay half buried in dirt, not quite human, not quite beast. The air smelled of iron and damp. Evelyn pressed her palm to the carving and shivered. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "If this is legend, it's the oldest one I've seen." My breath clouded in the cave's chill. I whispered to myself, "No going back." The echo repeated the vow, as if agreeing. The cave's echo gave us another voice, one that belonged to a man waiting by the fire. Daniel Cross said, "You'll never find answers without a guide." His smile was easy, practiced like a handshake at a funeral. Alex Mercer said, "You already knew would come." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, suspicion coiled behind her glasses. Daniel carried maps older than our journey, paper thin with sweat stains. He spoke of rivers twisting like veins and ruins that swallowed their own builders. His words wrapped the air like vines, heavy with promise. Alex Mercer said, "Why help now?" Daniel's grin widened, charm sharper than teeth. Daniel Cross said, "Because I've walked where fear has no compass." I believed him less than his fire, but more than the silence outside. Evelyn whispered, "Every ally has a cost." The flames bent as if agreeing. The trail narrowed into stone and shadow, and Daniel led with steps too sure for a stranger. Alex Mercer said, "You walk like the forest owes you." Daniel laughed, low and steady. Daniel Cross said, "It does, and it collects late fees." Evelyn scribbled notes between glances that measured him like a threat. The trees leaned closer, branches making nets of the sky. I traced the ground for signs of prints, but Daniel's words distracted, stories bent around every turn. He spoke of hunters who vanished, of rivers that rose without storms. Evelyn hissed, "He knows too much for coincidence." My chest tightened, but his charm pulled like gravity. Alex Mercer said, "Truth doesn't arrive with guides, it arrives with scars." Daniel only smiled, his silence sharper than his stories. Mist wrapped the clearing where stones stood like teeth, and the air carried the scent of moss and iron. A voice drifted from nowhere, thin as smoke. The informant said, "Not all paths are meant for walking." Evelyn's grip tightened on her notebook, and Daniel tilted his head like he'd expected it. Alex Mercer said, "Show yourself." The mist obeyed, forming the shape of a cloaked figure whose face stayed hidden. The informant said, "Your map is wrong, your ally lies, and your fear is the only compass that tells the truth." The words hit like a blade and left wounds of doubt. Daniel chuckled softly, unshaken. Evelyn whispered, "Cryptic riddles, always riddles." My chest burned with questions, but silence held my tongue hostage. The journal's pages turned brittle in my hands, each line a bone of a story I hadn't known. Noah's name surfaced in notes of missing hikers, his trail entwined with myths. Alex Mercer said, "He was closer than I thought." Evelyn leaned over, her voice a whisper of regret. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "We should have listened sooner." Daniel pretended disinterest, whistling at the shadows. But his eyes betrayed knowledge, flicking across dates he should not have known. My gut churned with suspicion, yet grief held me still. The sketches on the margins showed figures bent like monsters, river lines wrapped around them like cages. Alex Mercer said, "This isn't just myth, it's history written in fear." Evelyn touched my arm, grounding me. I wished it steadied me, but it only deepened the weight. Night pressed heavy as we argued under the trees, our lantern's glow thinning against the dark. Evelyn said, "This is obsession, Alex, not survival." Her words cracked like dry wood. I wanted to deny, but the silence between beats betrayed me. Daniel threw twigs into the fire, his grin reflecting flame. Daniel Cross said, "Obsession is what uncovers graves best left hidden." My jaw clenched, words sharper than knives on my tongue. Alex Mercer said, "Better hidden truth than lived lies." The forest answered with a long groan of wind, branches clawing like restless hands. Evelyn closed her eyes, her breath shaking. I looked into the fire and saw shapes forming, cryptids leaping in the flames like mockery. Alex Mercer said, "We're too deep to turn back." The silence afterward felt like agreement from the unseen. The cave opened into a chamber where shelves of stone cradled jars and journals sealed in wax. Dust danced in the beam of my lantern. Alex Mercer said, "This is no myth, this is record." Evelyn leaned closer, her fingers trembling on a brittle spine. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "These are government-issue tags." Each page bore stamps, red ink warnings that whispered secrecy. Daniel's grin flickered, betraying recognition. I tore the seal from one, the paper coughing truth. It spoke of cryptid captures, of cover-ups, of men vanished to keep silence. Alex Mercer said, "They've known all along." My heart beat like fists on locked doors. Evelyn whispered, "Then Noah." And she stopped, the word collapsing. I closed the journal, feeling the weight of decades press against my palm. Morning broke in shards through the canopy as we emerged from the cavern. Evelyn's pen scratched with urgency across her notebook, her doubts shrinking like mist in the sun. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "These aren't legends anymore." Alex Mercer said, "Belief isn't optional now." She nodded, eyes tired but certain. The forest seemed to breathe differently, alive with echoes of truths buried too long. Daniel walked behind us, his smile returned, though his silence pressed louder than words. A crow cawed overhead, as if mocking or warning. My hands tightened on the journal I carried, its spine warm from my grip. Evelyn whispered, "If the world knew, it would never sleep again." Alex Mercer said, "Then we must decide who to wake." We camped by a ridge where the horizon stretched endless, but trust shortened with every word. Daniel offered to gather wood, but the fire hissed at his return. Evelyn leaned close, her whisper urgent. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "He's steering us off path." My eyes caught the dirt on his boots, wrong for the trail we'd taken. Alex Mercer said, "He wants us lost." Daniel grinned when questioned, tossing a log into the flame. Daniel Cross said, "Every shortcut feels like betrayal until it saves your life." His charm was a blade dulled from overuse. Evelyn turned her gaze from him, but doubt anchored her shoulders. I stared into the fire and saw it mirror his smile. The informant appeared again, stepping from shadow as if born of it. His cloak dragged moss and silence with it. The informant said, "Maps lie, but fear tells truth." He handed me a scrap of parchment, edges burned, a map of rivers converging. Alex Mercer said, "What waits there?" The informant said, "Answers, but not mercy." Evelyn reached for the map, her fingers brushing mine. Daniel's eyes narrowed, hunger hidden poorly. The informant's gaze pierced like ice, as if seeing through skin to intent. He turned, vanishing into the dark as though he'd never been. The paper felt alive, its lines twitching like veins. Evelyn whispered, "Every clue is a curse." Alex Mercer said, "Curses still led forward." Storm clouds broke open as night fell, rain hammering the ridge until soil became flood. We scrambled for shelter, our lantern flickering against chaos. Evelyn shouted, "This won't hold." Her hair plastered to her face, her glasses fogging with each breath. "Alex Mercer," said the cave, "we go back." Daniel pushed ahead, pulling his coat tight, his smirk hidden by rain. Thunder cracked, swallowing our words whole. The map pulsed damp in my pocket, ink bleeding like veins rupturing. The ground shook, a branch splitting inches from where I stood. Fear carved its own shelter in my chest, but feet kept moving. Lightning framed us in its brief theater, cryptid shadows dancing in the trees. Alex Mercer said, "The storm doesn't want us to find it." The storm eased into silence, leaving the cave dripping with echoes. A man sat against the far wall, his eyes hollow but alive. His clothes were torn, and his breath rattled like broken glass. Marcus Hale said, "I was here before you, and I never left." His story spilled between coughs. His brother vanished chasing the same myths. He had followed, but the truth consumed more than it gave. Alex Mercer said, "You've carried this longer than anyone should." Marcus gripped an old locket, his hand trembling. Evelyn whispered, "He's the tragedy carved into this place." The shadows swallowed his tears before we saw them fall. His pain became a lantern heavier than any pack. I felt its weight settle on my shoulders, refusing to let go. The cave rumbled with a voice deeper than stone, and he stepped into the light like a judge in his court. The keeper of secrets said, "You dig where graves lie sealed." His calmness sharpened every syllable. Evelyn stood rigid, notebook trembling. Daniel smirked, but unease laced his grin. Alex Mercer said, "You can't own silence forever." The keeper's eyes glinted, ancient and unyielding. He spoke of balance, of worlds split by ignorance and knowledge. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, He believes himself guardian, not liar. Rain dripped from his coat though he hadn't touched the storm. His presence bent the chamber into submission. Alex Mercer said, "Guardianship isn't truth, it's chains." The keeper only smiled, as if chains were gifts. The firelight revealed a truth more bitter than flame. Daniel's smirk cracked into confession. Daniel Cross said, "You never asked why I knew the paths." His voice dripped with betrayal. Evelyn's eyes widened, disbelief melting into anger. Alex Mercer said, "You've led us in circles." Daniel stepped closer, his charm now venom. Daniel Cross said, "I serve the ones who keep order, not dreamers like you." The keeper watched silently, satisfaction curling his lips. Evelyn whispered, "You've been the saboteur all along." My chest burned, not from shock but from recognition. Betrayal always wore a familiar face. Alex Mercer said, "You'll choke on your own lies." Daniel only shrugged, the fire etching his shadow into something monstrous. I stood at the mouth of a choice, and betrayal tasted like iron. Daniel smirked, but I turned my focus to the trail of truth that had guided me this far. Alex Mercer said, "I won't stop for liars or guardians." Evelyn grabbed my arm, fear lighting her eyes. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Alex, obsession kills more than ignorance." Her voice broke like a plea. My chest tightened with memory, Noah's laughter echoing. I shook it off, letting grief turn into fuel. The keeper raised his brow, curious if I would bend. I said, "I will burn every shadow if that's what it takes." Evelyn recoiled, torn between reason and loyalty. The cave seemed to lean closer, waiting to swallow whichever vow I made. We moved deeper toward the sanctuary, but the air between us was fractured glass. Evelyn's silence was heavier than thunder. Daniel trailed behind, smug but watchful. Alex Mercer said, "We finish this even if trust is ash." The journal in my pack throbbed like a second heartbeat. The path narrowed, twisting into black stone corridors, carved by unseen hands. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, "Every step feels cursed." My boots echoed like warnings that no one heeded. The keeper followed, his presence looming like a verdict yet unsaid. Rain dripped through cracks, timing itself with our breath. Betrayal lingered between us, invisible but sharp. I whispered, "Forward is the only way left." The walls seemed to sigh in grim agreement. The sanctuary yawned before us, its walls carved with symbols of beasts not yet named. Bones lay preserved in glass coffins, scaled and clawed, half familiar, half nightmare. Alex Mercer said, "We've stepped into proof." My voice cracked against the vast silence. Evelyn pressed her hand to the glass, eyes wide with awe and dread. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, "Science will break under this weight." Daniel lingered behind, his grin curling into hunger at the sight. The keeper's presence pulsed like the cavern's heartbeat, steady and unyielding. He said, "Truth kills as easily as it frees." My pulse echoed the chamber, thundering louder than reason. Every fragment of bone felt alive, daring us to deny them. I whispered, "Noah, you were right." The chamber swallowed the name like a prayer. The keeper's voice broke the silence, smooth as stone polished by rivers. The keeper of secrets said, "Do you understand the danger of unleashing this knowledge?" His eyes pierced through us like knives disguised as reason. Evelyn's lips trembled as she scribbled, the pen scratching like thunder. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "We can't keep this buried forever." Alex Mercer said, "Truth exists whether we speak it or not." The keeper stepped closer, shadows bending to him. He said, "Then let silence be your offering to the world." My jaw tightened, the journal in my hands shaking with defiance. Evelyn whispered, "He wants to save control, not truth." I said, "Control has already stolen too much." The cavern held its breath, waiting for sides to be chosen. The chamber shook with the clash of belief and fear. Evelyn raised her voice, rare steel threading her tone. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "Alex, you can't let grief blind you. We must measure truth, not wield it like fire." My chest burned. Noah's name still raw on my tongue. Alex Mercer said, I won't bury him again by burying this. The silence afterward was a canyon, and Daniel chuckled low. Daniel Cross said, Listen to her, Alex. Fear is a better master than memory. Evelyn's eyes shone with desperation, but her voice broke softer. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, Don't let obsession take him twice. I turned from her, every step deeper into fire. The chamber roared with silence louder than thunder. Daniel lunged for the journal, his smirk dissolving into raw greed. Daniel Cross said, This belongs to those who can use it, not mourn it. My grip held our arms locked in struggle. Evelyn gasped, her voice sharp. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, Hell twisted for power. The keeper only watched, his lips curving into satisfaction. I'll. My breath tore through clenched teeth as I shoved Daniel back, his boots skidding on the wet stone. Alex Mercer said, Truth isn't your weapon. His eyes burned with rage, yet cracks in his lies began to show. Daniel's voice dropped, venomous. Daniel Cross said, Then you'll drown in it while I rise. The journal pulsed heavy in my hands, like it held its own heartbeat. A sound split the cavern, deeper than storm, older than myth. From the shadows a shape emerged, scales glistening under firelight. Its eyes burned with ancient patience. Alex Mercer said, It's alive. Evelyn's breath caught, tears balancing terror and wonder. Dr. Evelyn Hart whispered, We've never been prepared for this. The keeper bowed his head as if greeting an old god. Daniel froze, his arrogance cracking into awe. The creature shifted, its massive form brushing stone as though testing our worth. My chest pounded, every beat whispering that reality had split. Alex Mercer said, We thought truth was pages, but it breathes. The sanctuary thundered with life, and nothing written could cage it again. The cryptid's gaze burned into me, and for a heartbeat I saw Noah standing in its shadow, his voice recorded in every rumble. Alex Mercer said, You were searching here all along. My chest caved under the revelation. Evelyn touched my shoulder, eyes wet, whispering, He didn't vanish, he was claimed by the truth. The bones, the journals, the echoes, Noah's name bound them together like a thread. I felt grief reshaping into clarity, sharp and unrelenting. The keeper's calm voice cut through. The keeper of secrets said, Your brother chose silence to protect the world. My fists clenched, rage against mercy. Alex Mercer said, Noah deserved to be remembered, not erased. The cryptid shifted, as if echoing that defiance, its breath a living testament. Daniel's mask cracked as panic chewed through his arrogance. He shouted, This is madness, it can't be real. His eyes darted for escape, but there was none. Alex Mercer said, You lied, and still the truth stood taller than you. Daniel's voice trembled as he denied the undeniable. Daniel Cross said, I only wanted control, not this. The informant's whisper slithered through the cavern, unseen yet everywhere. The informant said, Lies rot when light arrives. Evelyn's pen slipped from her hand, forgotten in the weight of the moment. The cryptid's shadow pressed Daniel to his knees, stripping him of charm. I felt no triumph, only hollow clarity. Alex Mercer said, Truth doesn't need you to believe. It breathes regardless. Daniel bowed his head, crushed by his own ruin. The keeper moved forward, his voice steady as thunder without storm. The keeper of secrets said, You cannot hold this truth and survive its weight. His words reached for my resolve like chains. Alex Mercer said, I've carried worse, loss heavier than silence. Evelyn stepped between us, her voice sharp. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, This is not his to own or yours to bury. Her defiance sparked like fire. The keeper's eyes narrowed, his calm fraying. He said, Knowledge untamed will devour your world. My blood pounded, a rhythm of rebellion. Alex Mercer said, Then let it devour the lies first. The cryptid loomed, its eyes glowing brighter as if choosing its witness. The cavern groaned as if bracing for a verdict neither side could control. The informant's voice cut through again, colder than stone. The informant said, "One truth leads to 10 questions, and you'll never close them." His cloak swirled as if carried by invisible wind. He placed a hand on my arm, his grip light but chilling. The informant whispered, "Take your proof, but it will never give peace." His hood tilted toward Evelyn, then to the keeper, as if weaving threads none of us could see. Alex Mercer said, "Why guide me if you want me cursed?" He only smiled, a shadow behind the smile, before dissolving into mist. Evelyn shivered, her face pale. Dr. Evelyn Hart said he was never with us, just watching the unraveling. The journal in my pack felt heavier, like it carried the curse he spoke. The cryptid retreated into shadow, leaving silence thick as stone. The cavern dimmed, proof alive but untouchable. Evelyn wiped her glasses, her hands trembling. Dr. Evelyn Hart said, "We'll never undo this night." My chest heaved, truth sitting heavier than grief. Alex Mercer said, "We uncovered it, but at the cost of trust, peace, and Noah's memory." The keeper stepped back, his shadow stretching, a man both defeated and unbroken. He said, "Knowledge is never free." Daniel lingered in silence, broken, his lies stripped bare. The journal weighed against my ribs like an anchor. We stepped out into dawn, the forest alive with whispers of what it had seen. I whispered, "The truth breathes now, but it never heals." The rising sun crowned us in bittersweet light.